Hey PCWorld fans, Adam here with Will, and we are currently reviewing the suite of GeForce RTX 40 Super Series. On tap today, we are going to look at the 4070 Ti Super. We are comparing it against the original 4070 Ti, as well as a couple Radeon cards. We'll get to that. We're going to do gaming benchmarks in 1440p and also in 4K. We also have a little bit of ray tracing, a little bit of content creation workloads, some power draw, some thermals, you know, some just general overall feelings on these cards.
We want to know how they stack up.
Yeah, how they stack up. So stay tuned for that. Let's dig in. All right, so to get started, let's go over the specs, and it kind of falls in two buckets. The ones where it's the same and ones where it's different between the 4070 Ti and the 4070 Ti Super. So in terms of sameness, they're both targeting high-end 1440p gaming, some low-end 4K gaming, but really the Nvidia kind of positions this as a 1440p card.
Super premium 1440p.
Super premium 1440p. They both have the same 285 watt TGP, so there's no power increase here. And then the last thing that's the same is the price. It comes in, or starts at $800. The 4070 Ti non-super is not going to be sold anymore.
Throw it in the trash.
Throw it in the trash, but it begins at $800. So, you know, depending on the model. But what's different, the main one, is that it moves from an AD103 die to an AD104 die. So really, this is more like an imperfect 4080 rather than the perfect 4070.
So it's the same die as a 4080. It's just they're
yes,
ones that don't spec or ones that they're clocking down or whatever, or what we're seeing here.
Correct. Another major change, it does get a little bit of core count bump from 7,680 to 8,448. So slight bump in.
That's an itsy bitsy bump, man. That's like we're gonna see that, but the bars are gonna be real close to each other. Yeah. I think is my prediction there.
But really, the big thing people complained about when the 4070 Ti launched is that it only came with 12 gigabytes of GDDR6X VRAM, and the bus width was only 192-bit, which meant that while it was okay for 1440p, and that's where Nvidia was aiming, that looking forward to the future or trying to step up to 4K, that it just wasn't really well spent there. So it moves from that now to 16 gigabytes of GDDR6X and a 256 bit memory bus. So
a substantial memory bandwidth improvement.
Yes, yes. This is more just getting the 4070 Ti and kind of future-proofing it a little better. How that bears in benchmarks? We will see. We will see. Let's talk about the actual cards I have here testing against. The vanilla 4070 Ti that I have here is a Gigabyte GeForce RTX 4070 Ti Aero OC. Comes in at $900 MSRP, but can be found for actually around $850 as of this recording right now. But once again, it's going away, so you won't be able to find it.
Big beefy card.
As a big beefy card, yeah. While Nvidia did not produce a Founders Edition of the 4070 Ti, for the initial review I got sent this Asus Tough Gaming GeForce RTX 4070 Ti Super OC Edition. This clocks in at $880, so not
that is not $800, Adam.
Not $800, but closer to $800. The other card that I have in to test is the MSI GeForce RTX 4070 Ti Super Ventus 2X OC, and this one clocks in at $820. So not quite there, but close. So yeah. So on the Radeon side, comparing it, it kind of. We got two cards that kind of sit, you know, at the different ranges compared to these Ti variants. This one is the ASRock Radeon RX 7800 XT Challenger OC Edition. This comes at $500, so quite a bit less.
That's a much cheaper card, Adam.
Yeah, about $300 cheaper. But on the higher end, we have the Sapphire Radeon RX 7900 XT. This, when it was released, was $900, but because of the super refresh, the new price on this GPU is $750. Well, I should say, I'm sorry, the 7900 XT starts at $750. I actually can't find this edition anymore
available for sale.
For sale anymore. So we're talking about still a little bit cheaper than the Ti Super.
Yeah, so it's an interesting spot, right? Like an $800 video card, I expect to kind of light my world on fire.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see what the benchmarks look like.
Yeah, well, let's dig into them, and let's start with the synthetic benchmark. The one synthetic benchmark that I have for this is 3D Mark Speedway. This is a very intensive DX12 Ultimate benchmark. It is meant to really hammer a GPU, especially for RT and future-looking feature workloads. And you can see here the two 4070 Ti Super cards are neck and neck with each other, and you get a healthy bump over the non-super variant of the 4070 Ti, which already had a lead over the 7900 XT.
Yeah, so it's the same thing we saw with the 4070 Super reviews, where AMD has a little bit of a deficit when you're doing like heavy RT compute load, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's a synthetic benchmark, though, so I'm always a little skeptical.
It's a synthetic benchmark. I wanted to throw it out there. It is good to measure it.
People love 3D Mark.
3D Mark is cool. It's cool. But let's switch over to actual gaming. First, we're going to go into 1440p. Then we're going to do 4K. Then we're going to do RT and upscaling. Okay. So all of the 1440p and 4K gaming benchmarks that we're going to look at first are all just pure raster. Obviously, there's a lot of cool RT features and upscaling features that you can turn on, but to get a baseline feel for what these cards can do, pure raster is where we're going to focus on. So first up is Cyberpunk 2077, which definitely pushes all these GPUs hard. But looking specifically at the 4070 Ti versions, we're not too far off from each other.
No, we're the gap from 96 to 104 frames a second is it's less than 10%. We're not gonna. It's not a huge gap.
Bigger bar better though. Bigger bar better. So technically, the 4070 Ti Super is quicker, but
how does it stack up against AMD on these?
It actually falls in between the $500 7800 XT and the $750 7900 XT.
That bigger bar is cheaper than the shorter bar, though, Adam.
That bigger bar is cheaper, so bigger bar better on the AMD side, at least when it comes to no RT.
Nothing fancy on.
That's just one game. Let's breeze through a couple more here. Returnal at 1440p. Wow, that's once again the same kind of thing where all those 70 Ti variants are within spitting distance, and it falls right between those two AMD cards.
Yeah, but again, 7900 XT is looking pretty good right now to me.
It is looking pretty good. Well, let's switch over to Shadow the Tomb Raider, which is actually known to run a little bit better on Nvidia systems compared to AMD systems. And here, the 4070 Ti variants all stack up right there with the 7900 XT.
Yeah.
Let's move over to Rainbow Six Siege, which is a really high refresh rate esports game. So you want a lot of frames. And guess what? The actual non-super variant turned in a little bit better of a score than one of the Ti variants. So
that to me says you're getting to the point where you're approaching CPU bound probably, and it's maybe what the benchmark's actually testing maybe a little questionable.
Yeah, exactly. But they do have a nice little lead over AMD in this one. So yeah, let's move over to F1 2022, which also you want really high frame rates for this. And once again, we're not seeing too much of a difference, except for here, that 7800 XT is coming a little too close for comfort. $500.
Well, and your 7900 XT is again lit the world on fire. Yeah,
off the charts. I will say that I actually did testing on this Asus card. This is the one that was sent for review. Later on, I got this MSI card in, and when I went to go back and run this benchmark, there was an update for Call of Duty, and it broke the numbers, so I actually wasn't able to run the benchmark on here.
The perils of benchmarking live service games.
Yeah, but guess what? It's the same kind of story. It's right there with the non-super version. And once again, here we go. That $500 7800 XT is very, very close. And that's an average frame rate. If we look at the 1% lows, though, AMD does fall back a little further. We've kind of seen this before where AMD, the difference between average frame rate and 1% lows is going to be a little tighter on Nvidia compared to AMD.
Yeah, and the 1% lows again are measuring your micro stutter. So the slight hitches that you feel as you're moving your mouse from side to side. It's the average frame rate of the 1% slowest frames that are rendered and it's a really good indicator of, like I said, micro stutter and kind of hitchy performance.
And how smooth the game.
Yeah, the kind of stuff that really grabs you when it happens.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I do worry when I look at a 7900 XT with 186 on the average and 104 on the 1% slow. That's a worrisome delta for me.
Yeah. Once again, this is just these settings. It is a live service game. It gets updated. Obviously, I have been having some problems with it, so that's why we test multiple games, multiple resolutions.
Yes.
The last one for 1440p is Watch Dogs Legion, and we're seeing the same kind of thing here. Everyone's within spitting distance, and looking at the 1% lows on this one, it's that same kind of deal where the delta between the AMD averages and 1% lows is wider than on the Nvidia GPUs.
It's a little bit less pronounced on this one though, which is a good sign.
Definitely. So that's 1440p, and that's where these cards generally are meant to play. But the big question is, does adding that extra VRAM and adding a bigger butts width actually help in 4K gaming? And that was the thing that everyone screamed about. So now let's look at 4K results. First up is Cyberpunk 2077.
These look exactly the same, Adam.
Huh. Okay. Well, maybe we moved Returnal.
Same exact gaps.
Well, yeah, I mean, hey, bigger bar better. That's that is a bigger.
I don't know if I care $800 worth on
Shadow of the Tomb Raider. A little bit more pronounced.
Yeah.
I will say that the Nvidia cards are definitely pulling away from the AMD cards here. A little bit more than when they were at 1440p. Rainbow Six Siege. Once again, bigger bar better on the super variants, but yeah, it's F1 2022, same kind of deal.
I'll be honest, I'm pretty surprised that we're seeing, at the high resolution especially, we're not seeing an impact from the bigger memory bandwidth. I would expect more RAM, maybe less impactful, but bigger memory bandwidth I would expect to show a little bit more perf gain here.
Right, yeah, so we got a couple more games. Watch Dogs Legion, same kind of thing. I mean, technically it is a little bit better. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, a slight step up in the averages and the 1% lows, so nothing there.
It's really interesting to me. I think it's a testament to how much shader work is happening in games, even without ray tracing now, that we're actually seeing the impact of the cores. Like maybe we're shader limited on these games more than memory bandwidth limited.
Yeah, so I mean, I gotta say that's all the benchmarks for the rasterized gaming that I did. And I think one of the things to think about is I was the only one doing the benchmarks, right? It took, about 3/4 to a day each of these GPUs to do the testing. So I had to limit my testing and kind of, see what I could get done in that time. So I think there are situations, I'm sure there are games that you are going to find better performance in VRAM limited situations. Maybe we're just not seeing that here.
Yeah.
But also, on the same token, in the future, the demands on VRAM is probably just going to go up, right? So, I mean, it's not going to hurt to have more VRAM.
It never hurts to have more RAM. It never hurts to have more memory bandwidth. I think we've reached maybe the limit of what we're going to expect to see with raster stuff.
Oh, really?
Like,
okay.
Until we see way faster memory, GDR7, GDR8, I don't know.
Yeah. So, while these benchmarks are not showing light the world on fire 4K performance uplifts because of the VRAM changes, it doesn't mean there aren't any changes. It just means it's not as pronounced as we kind of expected, to tell you the truth. But
yeah,
in ray tracing, that's another story.
That's what I want to know about.
So now let's look at a couple benchmarks with RT, because maybe we'll see some changes there. I will say that the way that I ran the benchmarks here is with ray tracing on, but also some sort of upscaling on, because I feel like, for the most part, that if you're running RT features, you're probably going to be using some upscaling, right?
And while Cyberpunk with path tracing cranked all the way up is basically the high water benchmark for ray tracing right now on any platform.
Oh yeah.
It's not representative. It's not going to be playable on this kind of tier card at the resolutions we're talking about. So
I mean, unless you really fiddle with the settings and kind of, it depends on how you want to kind of play the game.
But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is you picked the ray tracing settings that are going to give you a playable frame rate.
Exactly.
At the level of machines that we're talking about.
So when it came to upscaling, I had to look and say, okay, well, what kind of upscaling am I going to use? Obviously, Nvidia has DLSS available to it. And you can get some good gains, good quality out of it. I needed kind of something to lay a little bit more of a even playing field. I didn't want to run DLSS on the Nvidia cards, but only FSR on the AMD cards. So I settled with FSR, which is still quite good, but it is vendor agnostic. So all of these are set with FSR set to balanced to keep it an even playing field. Once again, you might get more performance, you might get better quality out of DLSS, but the way that I benchmarked, I just want to keep it.
You want to be able to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
Exactly. So let's dive into Cyberpunk 2077. This is with the RT medium preset, so not full path tracing, not going all the way to the wall with it. FSR set to balanced at 1440p. That means it renders a native resolution of 1506 by 847.
Everyone's favorite resolution, I believe.
Yeah. So buff 720p, but not quite 1080p. And if we look at the results, the non-super variant was actually not doing too bad to begin with.
It was. I mean, this is indicative to me of the relatively paltry increase in CUDA cores. Right, we saw a relatively small increase in CUDA cores. Those are what does the ray tracing math, it turns out.
Yeah, but I thought ray tracing was a little bit more memory intensive as well. So
well, it depends. It's whichever is the slowest thing is going to be the most intensive.
So, right. Yeah. So I will say though, if you compare it to the AMD cards, AMD and ray tracing, and it has been known for a bit, drags behind Nvidia. I mean, not bad.
It's still playable frame rates, but
yeah, but it's the Nvidia is a better choice on that. But maybe we switch to 4K. So at 4K with the same settings, so RT and medium and FSR to balanced, this is rendering a native resolution at 2259 by 1270. So higher than 1080p, but not quite 1440p.
Yeah.
And here, it's not quite 60. And technically the super cards are a little bit faster, but
Once again, we're in numbers that I'd be thrilled to see on a Steam Deck, and I'm kind of underwhelmed for a desktop PC.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations you kind of have to fiddle with the settings and depend on what you want. For the most part, I would say most people probably are not willing to do a first-person shooter. But I mean, if you wanted to, I mean, you could turn on the RT features and check it out. I mean, these are playable.
You can see what it looks like.
Yeah, you can see what it looks like, and maybe use that as a starting place to kind of fiddle with some settings. But that's just Cyberpunk. So the other game that I benchmarked that has RT available in it is Returnal. Same kind of deal, 1440p with FSR set to balance. But here, the RT implementation is a little bit different. I would say it's lighter. Is that a better way to describe it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a launch window PS5 title. So I think the interesting thing about Returnal is it's probably more indicative of what a console port from a PS5 or Xbox Series X is going to look like for the rest of this generation, right? Like there's a limited budget for ray tracing on the consoles. They're relatively low powered by today's PC standards. So when you're bringing your PS5 games, your Xbox Series X games over, this is about the level of ray tracing and compute you're going to expect to see on them. So
and because it's actually a little bit lighter, I turned on the RT preset to Epic. So this is the most RT you can get out of this game.
But like all ray tracing games, developers pick and choose the features that they want to add. Some people do global illumination, which is really expensive. Some games just do like a little bit of shadows and a little bit of colored lights and a little bit of reflections, which is much less impactful.
Exactly. Which is why it's able to run on a
Which
console.
is why we're running on Epic and running on a PlayStation 5. Yeah.
So looking at 1440p results here in Returnal, I mean that's nothing. You're on the 4070 Ti results. It's right there with each other, but it definitely is
still faster than
AMD. Yeah. But over at 4K with a native resolution that sits somewhere between 1080p and 1440p, I would say that's still playable. That's all 100 frames a second. But we got a couple more charts to look at. So next up, let's look at the maximum power draw that I recorded here. In this case, I ran F122 on a loop. So that it was able to kind of, get a bunch of runs in, and then in the background I had HW Info recording the peak power that it saw during that
draw.
Yeah. So, and here we're actually seeing some variation, which is interesting because the rated spec for all of these cards should be 285. The tough version got pretty close to it. That Ventus dropped a little bit, but I would say it's two fan card. It's smaller. The clocks aren't as boosty on there, so that doesn't surprise me. But that Aero version, the non-super card, was actually sitting well below the other versions.
I mean, I'm looking at the 3 cards, and I'm thinking, is it possible? First off, there is a quiet mode overclock switch on the Asus board. So it's possible that they're...
And on this one as well, on the Gigabyte.
On the Gigabyte. So it's possible that they're saying, hey, to hell with thermals, let's get every single watt out of this thing.
Could be, but now when you look back at it though, maybe that also helps give context to some of the benchmarks where it was just a little bit slower than the other ones.
It does explain that.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure. Either way, they definitely do. All of them have a healthy lead over that top end Radeon card, which turned in almost 70 watts more power draw under the same load. This is a known thing. Nvidia cards are more power efficient, so that's what we're seeing here. And how it relates to thermals, not just the power draw, but also the card size. We're seeing that the smallest card, the Ventus, is actually the warmest card here. Surprise, surprise.
Weird.
Right? Yeah, it doesn't have as much cooling capability to it. And once again, surprise, surprise, that Aero with less power draw and the beefiest cooler that we have here is actually 14C cooler than the
good for them.
Yeah. So
and it's an older card too, right? So like the thermal interface is older. All of the stuff on there. That's impressive.
Yeah. So a lot of the thermals really depends on what kind of card that you get.
I think the general rule of more cooling surface on your cooling apparatus probably means you're going to get better temperatures.
Yeah. A couple more benchmarks. I do want to tease a little bit of testing that I've been doing. I've been working on this big, grandiose GPU testing suite for creative or for video editing specifically. And so I do have a couple charts here. These are just the overall scores. I'm not going to get into sub-scores here, but I kind of wanted to see how these cards fare in video editing. Obviously, a lot of people build PCs to do a lot more things than just gaming, so I want to start getting into more and more of that kind of testing. This is just kind of my little drop in the bucket. So let's check out Premiere Pro. So actually, I mean, even though the numbers are fairly close, we are seeing a good jump here in Premiere Pro, and I do think that comes down to VRAM, like maybe a little bit of the CUDA increase, but yeah, you're gonna have to tune in later for the full video where we go into the subscores to really dig into it.
I don't know. We'll have to see.
You have to watch the full video. But I also do have DaVinci Resolve numbers here as well, and it's a lot more pronounced. But I can definitely tell you that DaVinci Resolve definitely loves more VRAM when it has it. So we're seeing that here.
It's interesting here because our sheet has the 4070 Super and 4070 numbers as well. And those memory configurations, the lines are exactly, it's just a straight line where the memory configuration is the same, Adam.
Interesting.
Weird.
Yeah. So once again, maybe tune in for the full video to see that, but we're finishing this video up here, and the last kind of final thoughts over the card designs. How sad are you that they didn't actually make a Founders Edition model?
Look, I like a Founders Edition. They're almost always harder to get than they're worth chasing down. I'm kind of more interested these days in a bigger, quieter card than a Founders, with a few exceptions, are usually pretty svelte. So I'll take a big chunky boy if it's quiet and fast.
Yeah, and I mean we definitely saw that performance, while it was even, the actual thermals definitely did range depending on the size of the card. Yeah, I mean if you have a smaller case, then obviously you're only limited by such things. But yeah, there is a reason to pony up a little bit more money for the bigger cooler, because that's the other thing. $820, $880. Mostly you're talking about the actual aesthetics and size of the cooler and capability and stuff. So yeah.
The one thing I think I'm taking away from this is that I wouldn't spend a lot of extra money above the base price on a highly overclocked card. I think I would just and honestly, I would look really hard at the 7900s.
Right? Yeah. I mean, you're getting a lot of performance, and if at least keeping up or surpassing in a lot of ways, depending on what you're playing. Not in ray tracing.
If you're playing non-ray trace games,
yeah.
if you're playing a lot of multiplayer games, if you're playing, God help you, DX11 multiplayer games, I think the 7900 is probably going to be the winner for you.
Yeah, not bad. I do want to point out, last thing to note of these cards is that this MSI version does not have a dual BIOS version where both the Gigabyte and the Asus does. So, I think that's another thing, depending on how much you're willing to spend, that you're going to get out of it. So
at the same time, you could fit that MSI into an ITX case, and I don't think you could on either of these others.
You can try. You can try. It depends on the case.
Bust out the Dremel.
Yeah. I guess we'll try it. I'll report back. Thank you for sitting down and running through these numbers with me. I appreciate this. Is kind of the first time I'm doing GPU testing like this, so it's been a little harrowing, to say the least.
It's the thing that people don't remember about having lived this life in the past, but in pre-video days, the thing people don't really understand is that these benchmarks take a really, really long time to run. It's like put the card in the morning and maybe by the end of the day you've finished the entire lap. And you're talking about, 12, 15 benchmarks over 20 runs for the different, for 3 runs each. It's a ton of sitting there and watching 3D Mark and Siege and Call of Duty, and so it's been fun. I'm glad I'm able to help you out, Adam.
Yeah, well, and hopefully it's been enlightening, and it helps people decide on which GPUs they want to buy in the future. If you want to see more GPU testing videos like this, and especially that video editing one that I keep teasing, be sure to subscribe here on PCWorld. Until the next one, we will catch you later.
What we should do is just speed it up 2x in the edit. And then it's going to be a 15-minute
Dude,
video.
I only watch YouTube videos at 2x.
I just put them on 2x and turn on closed captions and mute them.
No, you do a 0.5x. Just really
Why on
savor.
earth? Only when I'm watching slime videos, man.